What is happening, everybody? It's time for another MLB Live Before Lock. As you guys are watching here, do us a big favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're streaming this on both YouTube as well as playback. A little bit later on in the night, there's going to be NBA Live Before Lock also on YouTube and playback. And then myself and Josh Engelman, we're going to be watching the Knicks-Pacers game over on playback if you guys want to hang out with us for a watch-along later on in the night. But before that, we've got some baseball to break down. We're sponsored here by DraftKings Pick 6, which is a really fun game format that I recommend you guys playing. If it is available in your state and you haven't checked out already, go check out DraftKings Pick 6. It's a pick'em format where you're playing against the field as opposed to against the house, and seems to have a really big edge to it, Matt, because I was seeing some screenshots of it from earlier in the week where the game Donovan Mitchell didn't play, like a decent chunk of the field played Donovan Mitchell, which was going to be an L for people in there. So good edges to be had there over in DraftKings Pick 6. So go check that out if you guys haven't already. Matt, how you doing today?
I'm good, man. Normal Friday. Happy the weekend's coming up. Nothing special over here. How about yourself?
Yeah, I just been watching a little bit of golf while I've been working today, getting ready for this baseball slate. A couple things have changed since earlier in the day. Most notably, the ownership projections at pitcher are most different. The thing that I'm most bummed out about is earlier in the day when Lofty and I were doing the show, Chris Bassett was projected north of 30% ownership. And I was like, well, that's going to be a crazy good leverage spot stacking against Chris Bassett. But field wisened up and Chris Bassett's ownership has come down. Something else that's different about the slate now as compared to earlier. This morning when Lofty and I were recording, there was about a 70% chance of thunderstorms in Atlanta for tonight's game, and that has dissipated since then. So the Atlanta Braves were a team that earlier in the day I had written off, not because I didn't think it was a good spot for them against Matt Waldron, but I've written them off because it just didn't look like the game was going to play. So that's something else that really introduces a different wrinkle, a little bit of a different element in spots to be getting to on the slate that we'll be talking about later. But where we are going to start here is at the pitching. And if you guys have any questions for us in the Discord, at me, one of the perks of being a stochastic sub is you do get access to our Discord channel. And I'm always active in there checking out the different questions people have. And then also, if you guys have any super chats or anything on YouTube, hit me up over there. And I'm always on the lookout for those as well. But let's start by looking at the high-end pitchers, Matt. And it's a big slate. There's a lot of different options here. Let's group in all of the pitchers who are 9K or higher together. That encompasses Bryce Miller, Cole Ragans, Nestor Cortez, Tyreek Skubal, Freddie Peralta. Here's what's changed from earlier outside of just the weather situation. Cole Ragans was projected for like 35% ownership this morning. He was the chalk of the slate alongside with Chris Bassett, who I mentioned earlier. Both of their ownerships have come down pretty significantly. So I don't have the same ownership concerns they had about Ragans earlier. He's 25%. Nestor Cortez is 25%. Then you got Tyreek Skubal, 13%. Freddie Peralta only at 8% on the road against the Houston Astros, who are starting to come on now, only 5 games out of first place in the AL West. And then Bryce Miller only being 1% owned. All things being considered, Matt, who's your favorite spend-up option today?
I hate this because I think he might be the worst pitcher of all of them. Definitely worse in my mind than Skubal and Peralta, but it's Cortez for me here. By far the best spot. He's been lights out at home this year throughout his entire career. His underlyings are a lot better than his actual numbers. He's the top pitcher in the tools by a pretty healthy amount. I'm not a huge Cortez guy, but he's the top guy for me tonight.
So earlier in the day, I liked Cortez over Ragans, but it was because the ownership gap was pretty significant. Cortez was almost half of the ownership of Ragans when Lofty and I did the show this morning. Now, the ownership is identical. It's 24.6% for Cortez, 24.6% for Ragans. And we're looking to the decimal point. These guys are the same solid matchups for each of them. Cortez at home against the Chicago White Sox, Ragans at home against the Oakland A's. So I do think both of them are strong options, but between the two of them, I do slightly lean towards Cole Ragans because I do think he's the better overall pitcher. Also presents more strikeout upside. Cole Ragans is somebody who's been an elite starting pitcher this year as far as strikeouts are concerned. And overall, you mentioned also that Nestor Cortez has pitched better than what his ERA suggests. Same goes for Cole Ragans. He has a 4.22 ERA, but a 3.59 expected ERA, a 2.63 FIP. If you look through the game log of Ragans, what's actually happened to him is he's had 2 really bad outlier starts. He's been great otherwise. He has a start against the Angels where he pitched 6 1/3 innings, gave up 7 earned runs. He has a start against the Orioles where he totally got lit on fire, pitched 1 2/3 innings, gave up 7 earned runs. He has been nearly flawless in every other start that he's had this season. So it's those 2 starts that really inflate his ERA. He's been great otherwise. So you get this guy, it's like, all right, once every 4 or 5 starts, get a blow up from Cole Ragans, and he pitches like an ace and all of those other ones. I'm actually slightly overweight to each of Nestor Cortes and Cole Ragans. So clearly, I don't have an issue with either of these guys, but I do slightly prefer Ragans. And if you guys are playing cash games today, I think ideally you want to be playing both of these guys in cash.
I agree. Yeah, I think you can quibble between the two. Underlyings for Ragans are better than its actual, but they're not as good as Cortez, at least in some regards. In some, they're better. So I think these guys are basically even, and the ownership shows it.
Yeah, it's very close. Both of them are strong options today. If you say you prefer Cortez or prefer Ragans, it's so interchangeable between the two. But either way, I think they're two really strong pitching options. Do you like any of the contrarian pay up options where we got Freddie Peralta being 8% owned, like we said, Tyreek Skubal 13% owned, then Bryce Miller only 1% owned? These guys are also very good starting pitchers, but just in way harder matchups and for different reasons. Bryce Miller's against the Orioles. They have an elite offense. Freddie Peralta on the road against the Astros. Their offense is going to be elite going forward. Tyreek Skubal matchup against the Arizona Diamondbacks might not be quite as hard, although the Diamondbacks have hit left-handed pitching really well this year, but they simply don't strike out against lefties. The last 2 years, 17 and 19% strikeout rate against lefties, and pretty similar offense this year to what it was last year. So that's where I personally find it a little bit harder to get to these other guys. But for yourself, is the ownership enough to sway you towards these other pay-up pitchers?
No, but if it were, it would be Skubal and Peralta. Bryce Miller is a big no for me. Much better at home, brutal spot. Skubal and Peralta are also in really tough spots, but they're good enough where you could make the case to play them in any spot when they're not getting love. Peralta is not getting as much love. He's also a little bit more expensive. I would prefer Skubal between the two. I just don't want to pick on Arizona with a lefty when there's other good options. So you can make a case for either of those guys in my eyes. I'm just not getting to them.
So I have no lineups with Bryce Miller. My top 150 lineups, none of them have Bryce Miller. Of my top 150 lineups, one of them has Freddie Peralta, and 3 of them have Tyreek Skubal. So these are guys I'm not really getting to. Whereas Nestor Cortes, Cole Ragans, they're 2 of my highest owned pitchers on the entire slate. So there's where my rooting interests are going to be for today. Not crazy ownership, 24.6%, like we said, for Cortes, 24.6% for Ragans. I don't find either of those price tags to be problematic. So let's move on to the next tier of pitchers, and that is going to be the 8K range, where we have a couple more popular pitchers. Kyle Harrison is 22% owned against the Rockies. Christian Scott is 15% owned against the Marlins. The other pitchers in this price range, we got Max Fried in a tough matchup against the Padres. McKenzie's pitching against the Twins. We got James Paxton against the Reds. We got Brian Bayo against the St. Louis Cardinals. Of the pitchers in the 8K range, any of these guys that are standing out to you?
Yeah, this is a good range here. I like Christian Scott a lot. I know that the tools don't have him as high as the other guys, but great matchup for him. Great ballpark. He's been really good. He's been good in the minors for the past 2 years. Hasn't slowed down at the major league level, despite a couple tougher matchups. He gave up some runs to the Braves last time out, but struck out so many guys that it didn't even matter. He was still good. I think he's too cheap in this spot. I like Christian Scott a lot. I like both pitchers in this game. We'll get to Luzardo in a minute. But you can make a case for Max Fried because he's really good. You could make a case for Harrison, obviously, because of the matchup. I'm off him, though, at that ownership. I would just much rather play Christian Scott, who I think is the better fantasy pitcher right now, than Harrison, who's getting more ownership. So that's where I stand there. I don't think they're all that different in terms of their quality of play tonight, but give me the lower owned guy. Fried if you want a contrarian guy, but I won't get there. How about you?
Yeah, so I like Christian Scott. I just find it a little bit, I find it a little hard to get to him because I couldn't play everybody. It's a big slate. There's a lot of options. So I have lineups with him. I'm just a little bit underweight to the field, and it's just kind of an opportunity cost sort of thing where, trying to get overweight to Ragans, trying to get overweight to Nestor Cortes. There's a pitcher I really, really like on this slate that we're going to be talking about in a little bit as well. So my preferred option in this range is Kyle Harrison. I'm not all that much different from the field. He looked crazy under-owned earlier in the day to the point where like I was confused by it. He was 15% owned in the initial ownership run, which I was looking at it as like, wait a second. We just saw Kyle Harrison be uber chalk on the road against the Rockies in Coors Field. And I was like, really, people aren't going to play him now that this game is in San Francisco. And I know the Coors Field slate, that was a little bit of a smaller slate, so there were less options. But now the ownership on Kyle Harrison looks a little bit more appropriate to me at 2,200 or 22% at the $8,200 price tag. Great matchup for him clearly against the Colorado Rockies, who are likely to be a little bit better against lefties than righties this year. But still, you take the Rockies out of Coors Field, that is as easy as a matchup could possibly be. Christian Scott is one of the top young arms in baseball. Although with that said, it kind of gets overshadowed a little bit because this rookie class of pitchers in the National League, I was looking at it earlier. It's the most insane thing I've ever seen, Matt. Because did you see the Skeen start earlier today?
He is ridiculous.
Six shutout innings, 11 strikeouts. He struck out the first 6 hitters he faced. So we now got this NL rookie pitching class includes Imanaga, Yamamoto. We've got Paul Skeens. We've also got Jared Jones. We've got Christian Scott. And it is just absurd the amount of pitching talent that's been added to the National League this year. So, I mean, people were asking me, do I like Skeens for the NL Rookie of the Year? And like to an extent, you'd be like, oh my God, look how crazy Skeens has been. And he's 12-1 to win Rookie of the Year. But then it's like Imanaga's got like a sub-1 ERA as a rookie this year. Yamamoto has been pitching like an ace. Jared Jones has been terrific. And that's not to mention some of the other guys as well, like Christian Scott, for example. So it's an insanely loaded NL rookie class, but more pertinent to the DFS slate we're discussing right now. I like Christian Scott. I would like to be getting more of him. It's just I like other pitchers a little bit more on the slate, but can't fault anybody for playing him. I have him in my player pool, just a little bit underweight to the field. My preferred guy in this range, it is Kyle Harrison. Are there any contrarian options you're liking in this pricing range?
The only guy would be Fried. And again, I don't like the matchup, but the Padres have been awful against left-handed pitching this year. I mean, even go back to their last game against Austin Gomber. Gomber was one of the better pitchers on that slate. Fried is really good, and he's not getting ownership. So I think Fried would be the guy that I could convince myself to play. But that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's guys like Fried. It's like, oh, there's a talented pitcher with no ownership. But then once again, it's like, what's the opportunity cost of rostering some of these guys? And it's just there's other pitchers that I like quite a bit more. So not quite getting to any of the super low owned guys there. But let's go into the 7K range. There is one pitcher that I really like in the 7K range. But the pitchers that we have here that are picking up ownership, it's just 2 that are priced in the 7K range. We've got Jesus Luzardo at 22% ownership, Chris Bassett at 17% ownership. I'm definitely a little bit brokenhearted that Chris Bassett is no longer mid 30% owned, because that would have just been the greatest leverage spot to be attacking Chris Bassett. But now he's 17% owned, and that is, I mean, it's like slightly more appropriate. I'm still way underweight to the field on Chris Bassett, but still not somebody that I feel quite as much as the great leverage spot to be stacking against him that it was earlier. What stands out to you of these pitchers in the 7K range, Matt?
I mean, Luzardo's like 1,200 too cheap.
Yeah.
And I know he hasn't been like amazing this year, but he missed a little bit. He was very good in his last start. I've always been a big Luzardo fan, and his stuff is really good. The Mets are not good against left-handed pitching. Same park as Christian Scott. He's just too cheap. So Luzardo all day. How about you?
Yeah, it's Luzardo for me. And yeah, his underlying numbers are better than his ERA, but they don't look all that great. Have you looked at his matchups this year, though?
Brutal.
So when you see a pitcher which, everything's kind of a small sample size at this time of year, but here's where that could be really impactful. Just looking at a pitcher's like ERA and expected ERA and all that stuff. These are the recent starts that Jesus Luzardo has had. Phillies at the Cubs, Braves at the Yankees, and he got hit around by the Yankees as well as the Braves. He's been really good this year outside of those starts against the Yankees and the Braves. And still overall for the year's underlying numbers, they're not terrible or anything like that. They're just lagging behind what he produced in other years. And I think a lot of that could just be pointed to those matchups. Like the guy has not been able to catch a break with his strength of schedule as of late. And the matchup he has today against the Mets, I'm not going to say it's the easiest matchup in the world, but it's a hell of a lot easier than the other ones that he's had. And because he's had all these difficult matchups that have made it so we haven't seen very many ceiling games out of Jesus Luzardo, although he pitched great against the Phillies last time out. As a result, you mentioned he's about $1,200 too cheap, which I tend to agree with. Luzardo is my most rostered pitcher on the entire slate. And once again, the reason he's so cheap is because the recent performances haven't been all that great outside of the one against the Phillies. But like, how great can we expect the guy to pitch against the Yankees or the Braves? Like, was anybody playing Luzardo in those matchups? I don't think so. I don't remember him being popular. And it's because people didn't want to play him because the matchup was hard. And then because he wasn't lights out in those starts, then it's like his price goes all the way down. He's somewhat popular at 22%, but there's no single pitcher on the slate I look at the ownership of and say like, oh, that's a problematic ownership when, you know, the most popular pitchers are Raggeds and Cortez at 24.6% ownership.
Yeah, we just got a game changer though. Mason Black starting for the Giants on Friday. I think he's a much better DFS pitcher than Harrison, and I haven't even looked at his price, but I like him a lot now, depending on where he's priced at.
All right, I'm going to have to redo everything now. Let me see, Mason. When was the last time he started? Also, yeah, that came out
Recently.
Right, Mason Black. Oh, let's pull this up. See what's going on here. All right, Mason Black. Boy, Mason Black's numbers are horrific this year. It's only
Are they? I thought he had a really good first start. Am I wrong?
Yeah. His first start, he pitched. I don't know if he's stretched out either. He's made 2 starts. He went 4 1/3 innings in each of them. So here's the numbers for Mason Black: 6.23 ERA, 5.67 expected ERA. He's a 14% K rate. He is an unranked prospect in the Giants organization. What are his projections? His projections aren't too terrible, but he's also projected to be a reliever the rest of the year. So it's like Zips has him projected as a starter. They have him with a 4.57 ERA. Steamer has him with a 4.1 ERA and a low strikeout rate, but that's as a reliever. The Bat has him the rest of the season, 4.42 ERA. That's also as a reliever.
Yeah, I was thinking of someone else.
AAA last year, he had a 3.86 ERA, 5.33 FIP. What's the price point on him as well? Obviously,
I don't even see him in the pool.
Mason Black at any other point during the day. That's a good point too. Aiden Elston asked, "Is he in the player pool?" I assume he is, just because he's been on.
I don't see him.
Oh, you don't see him?
No, I don't see him in the pool.
Yeah, looks like he might not be. Let me go to the Giants.
I don't know. I probably made much to do about nothing there. You're right. It's not probably not even worth talking about. So my bad on that.
Yep, he's not in the player pool on DraftKings. Let me pull up FanDuel just to see if he's in the player pool over there.
Does make Harrison obviously not in play anymore.
Yes. Mason Black is in the player pool on FanDuel at $6,300. I mean, still, you have to take a look at what his price would be on DraftKings. He's not in the player pool, so it doesn't matter. I'm really surprised he isn't. But it's a great matchup at home against the Colorado Rockies. At $6,300 on FanDuel, that's certainly a playable price point.
Yeah, it's such a good matchup. That's all it was. You know, I misspoke on how good he actually is, but it's a great matchup at what I had presumed to be a good spot or a good price tag, but he's not in the pool on DK.
Well, there's an annoying change to this slate, mostly because now I have to redo all of my lineups because I had Kyle Harrison in, mid 20% of them. I had him in 26% of lineup. So obviously now I have to redo everything, wait for projections to update, redo everything in the Sims and the contest generator. Big pain in the ass here, but I prefer we get this information now than post lock, because then it's really annoying to update all your MLB lineups post lock. I mean, we have the late swap tool, which does make it easier, but I just hate moving around stuff post lock when it's not like basketball where like a new value play opens up or anything. It would just be like changing my lineups and changing the ownership that I already set out. So better now than an hour from now. But take note, guys. Kyle Harrison out. Mason Black is going to be the starting pitcher for San Francisco Giants. And I do think he's in play at $6,300 on FanDuel. Let's see. Where do we leave off by talking? All right. So you and I are both on the same page with Jesus Luzardo being a pitcher we like at $7,400. Anything else that stands out to you amongst these pitchers in the 7K range? The only other one that's picking up ownership is Chris Bassett. If you want, you could share your opinion on Chris Bassett. I think it's fairly ridiculous that he's somewhat popular on a slate of this size, though.
I don't know. He's too cheap and Tampa strikes out a lot. So I don't think he's over-owned. I don't particularly like it, but I don't hate it either. I mean, he's 7,200 and Tampa strikes out a lot. So he'll probably give up some runs, but I think he can get some strikeouts here, and it's not the worst play in the world. Again, I'm not really vouching for him. I just don't think it's as bad as you do, it sounds like.
And Dan06712 over in playback said, what happened to Kyle Harrison? It is just to push him back to give him an extra rest day. They didn't know that earlier. They just decide now, like a couple hours before the game. It's like, how about a different pitcher? Why not? I mean, come on, guys. What are we doing here? Just annoying. Just annoying me. But yeah, it doesn't seem like anything that's like some significant injury or anything. It's just they decided to give him an extra rest day here. So that's where we're at. Any punt options that you're liking? We'll go over these cheap starting pitchers where let's just include everybody who's sub 7K. Two of these pitchers are picking up ownership. Ryan Feltner is 13% owned against the Giants. Then we've got Hunter Brown is 12% owned against the Brewers. Hunter Brown is $6,900. Ryan Feltner is $5,500. The only other pitcher that's cheap in picking up ownership is Andrew Heaney at 8%. Any of these cheap guys that are standing out to you, somebody might want to be getting to in a lineup, Matt?
Andrew Heaney kind of stands out. The tools like him. He's not getting a ton of ownership. The Angels are getting ownership. He's been a lot less volatile this season. Yeah, Heaney. I mean, he looks pretty good in the tools. And again, the Angels are getting ownership. So it's a nice leverage play to add on to what I already think is a decent play. So Heaney, how about you?
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you. I liked Heaney earlier in the day, and I was thinking he was going to get more popular as we went on throughout the day, just because, that happens all the time. If somebody kind of stands out as being, oh, this guy's super cheap and a good matchup and all that, they typically end up being more popular as the day goes on, or the inverse happens where it's like, how is Chris Bassett 30-something% owned? And then you get later onto this, it's like, oh, okay, he's actually owned in the teens here. But Andrew Heaney is number one in a very good matchup today against the Angels. And the other part, too, we've seen this with Andrew Heaney over the years. He's very volatile, but he has upside as a fantasy pitcher. He's always been a guy who's been able to generate strikeouts. His strikeout rate is down a little bit this year at 22.5%, although still it's not terrible relative to his price tag. And every single projection for season long project him to be a better strikeout guy going forward, which I tend to think is going to be the case given his career history. But even then, I mean, 4.39 ERA, 3.8 expected ERA. These are not terrible metrics for a pitcher who's going to likely have a strikeout rate in the mid 20% range. And then he's super cheap as well. He is, let me just see if we have any ownership or updates or anything like that for Harrison being scratched. And not quite yet. I was curious to see if that moved his ownership at all. I mean, it's going to likely go up a little bit. Nothing like too crazy or anything like that. He's only 8% owned right now. Maybe ends up being, 10 or 11% after that Kyle Harrison ownership is distributed to all the other pitchers on the slate. But still $6,600 for him. It's a very cheap price point. It's not ridiculous to see a start where he pitches pretty solid and gets you like 18 to 22 fantasy points. It's going to be Andrew Heaney for cheap. Hunter Brown's likely going to turn around his season sooner rather than later, just because he is a talented pitcher, has been incredibly unlucky with just infield singles and things of those sorts of hits this year. So maybe a little bit of interest in him, but my favorite cheap guy, I'm with you. It's Andrew Heaney.
Yeah, I think we see that pretty much eye to eye. I don't love him, but I think he's more than viable at that price point.
Anything else that stands out to you amongst these cheap pitchers?
Mm-mm.
All right, let me check, see if we got any questions in Discord. And yes, Einstein wants to know, favorite sub 7K pitcher, and can a case be made for Clevinger? For me, it's Heaney. No interest in Mike Clevinger. I mean, a couple things. First, Clevinger's terrible. He's also pitching on the road against the Yankees.
Yeah, I'm good on that.
Yeah, I'll pull up Clevinger's numbers here. Here's what we're looking at for the season for Clevinger. Well, he's only made 2 starts, so I won't put that much weight into it. He made 24 starts last year. Wasn't too terrible. He was actually pretty solid last year. 3.77 ERA, 4.1 expected ERA. The 2 years prior to that, though, 4.65 expected ERA, 4.73 expected ERA. And then also, he's not been a strikeout guy in quite some time. He was earlier in his career, but he's since suffered injuries. So peak of Mike Clevenger was a guy who had like a mid to high 20% strikeout rate, which I'm sure you remember from his time with Cleveland, Matt. And his best year, he actually had a 33.9% strikeout rate in 2019. But now, since getting hurt, 14.7% strikeout rate this year was 20% last year's 18.8% the year before. So you got a guy that doesn't miss bats pitching against the Yankees. That's kind of a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I have zero interest in him. I think the Yankees stack is way more viable than him.
All right, so let's go ahead and look at the FanDuel side of things. And over on FanDuel, what is pitcher ownership looking like there? Once again, I'll refresh. I'm just constantly refreshing to see if we get any of when the updates come through for Kyle Harrison being scratched. But FanDuel side of things here, we have also fairly spread out ownership. Only 3 pitchers on FanDuel projected for double-digit ownership, man. One of them was Kyle Harrison. The other 2, Nestor Cortes, 15%, Cole Ragans, 16%. So same deal on FanDuel as is on DraftKings. Ragans and Cortes are your 2 popular pitchers, nearly identical numbers here. Cole Ragans, 16% projected ownership, 5.7% chance to be the top scoring pitcher in our data. Nestor Cortes, 15% ownership, 5.8% chance to be the top scoring pitcher. Both of them look really solid. I prefer Ragans. Is it same deal for you on FanDuel where you slightly prefer Cortes over Ragans, but think both of them look pretty good?
It's the same exact thing for me. I think, again, you could go back and forth on those guys, but they look just identical on both sites. And, I can't really choose between the two. I'm with you.
If you're going cheap at pitcher on FanDuel, what is standing out to you on the cheaper end, if anything? All of these guys outside of Ragans and Cortes currently projected for single-digit ownership because the only other guy was Kyle Harrison, but he's been scratched. We talked about Mason Black. He's so cheap, and he's pitching against the Rockies, so that's certainly one direction you could go. But any other cheap pitchers that you're liking here, Matt?
So the thing that makes Black even more viable, FanDuel like condenses their pitching pricing more than DK does.
Mm-hmm.
So like there are no like cheap guys that are even viable because Luzardo's more expensive, like Hunter Brown, but really tough matchup. Feltner, I guess, but that's where I think it'd be Mason Black. I really do.
Yeah. I'm curious to see what his ownership ends up being. We did just get a projections update, and then ownership will soon be to follow. And let's see, Mason Black. We have projected for 21 fantasy points on FanDuel. But once again, like super cheap, $6,300. So, he projects better than the pitchers that are kind of priced around him. And then he's still the cheapest pitcher on FanDuel because who was the cheapest before? Clevenger?
I think Hunter Brown. Oh, not Clevenger. You're right.
Yeah, so even then you're getting, $400 salary savings there. So, Mason Black looks like a pretty good cheap pitcher over on FanDuel. I'm sure we'll have ownership there shortly. Anything else you want to add about the FanDuel pitchers?
I don't think so.
Oh boy, Jung-Hoo Lee, season-ending surgery for Jung-Hoo Lee.
Oh, I got it.
That's not good news for the San Francisco Giants. They're gonna suck on offense, I think, for a lot of the season going forward.
I have him on both my year-long big money fantasy teams, so that is also not good news for me.
Let's see, were there any other Discord questions? Nope, it looks like we are good on that end for now. Jordan knows the deal. I see he's already changed the screen over in Zoom, which means time to go ahead and build some lineups in the lineup generator. Before we do, I have a couple of deals to tell you guys about. Edwards, our deal for $19.99, the price point on our NBA Sims Max package. Today is the last day. If you guys have not taken advantage and you want to play NBA DFS and use our tools for a discounted price, last call. Today is the last day of the Edwards promo. So if you guys have been waiting to sign up for it, go ahead and do it now. Edwards is the promo code. Sign up using the link below, and that promo code's already loaded in. Less than $20 for NBA Sims Max package. That'll cover you for the next week of NBA games. And it's been super, super valuable tools to use, our contest generator and our sims for showdown slates, because that's going to be what's coming up next. If the Pacers win today, we're going to have a 2-game NBA slate on Sunday, and that would be the last 2-game NBA slate of the season. And then it's going to be showdown from here on out. One other deal as well. Matt, I'm sure you know about the Scotty Scheffler situation.
How could you not?
We've got a deal going on as well. We thought this would be a fun thing. If you sign up over at OddsShopper with the promo code FREESCOTTY, you're going to get OddsShopper for 1 week for $1. So if you want to try out our betting tools, $1 with the promo code FREESCOTTY. There's also a link for that below. Just kind of a fun little flash deal that we thought would be something to throw up here, considering the situation with Scotty Scheffler. Let's go ahead and build some lineups now in the MLB lineup generator. And Larry CS, will ownership be updated? Yeah, it'll be updated shortly. What happens is we have to update projections before we update ownership. And then for baseball, especially on a slate this size, it takes a few minutes to update ownership. It's not a instant or anything like that, but it'll be coming pretty, oh, there we go, 30 seconds ago. So it just updated. Jordan, can you build balance lineups for DraftKings, all stack types? Don't lock anybody in or anything. I'm going to update everybody on the pitcher ownership while you build out those lineups. So I'll look at pitcher ownership for DraftKings as well as FanDuel. Oh, you know why? Because it just updated 30 seconds ago, and we went into this before you had, yeah. So go refresh it, and we should be good. It might take like 1 more minute, because I think there's like 2 minutes in between when everything updates on the site and when he is in here. Yeah, just let's see. Try skipping this and seeing if anything comes up. At the very least, it'll be like a minute or two, and then he'll be taken out. So let me read the updated. I'm going to read the updated ownership projections, Jordan. Then Matt and I will do our favorite single entry stack. Then we'll go back to the lineup generator. So updated ownership projections with Kyle Harrison being out. Cole Ragans is 26% owned now. Nestor Cortez 27%. So each of them went up by like a couple percentage points. Nothing crazy. In the mid-range, Christian Scott has gone up to 18%. So he was, 14% before, Matt? Now he's 18%. He's become a little bit more popular. And then on the cheap end, Luzardo is now 25% owned. Chris Bassett is 17% owned. Then the low end, Hunter Brown 11% owned. Ryan Feltner 14% owned. Does this change any of your opinions on anything? Nobody really crazy changed. It's like the pitchers that were picking up ownership each became like 2 to 3% more popular. And just that ownership that was going to Kyle Harrison kind of got dispersed.
Yeah, see it exactly the same. So with you here.
FanDuel. Let's see what FanDuel looks like, because that's kind of interesting when you consider that Kyle Harrison was quite popular over on FanDuel. Oh, this is interesting. So Cortez and Cole Ragans are both about the same ownership, but now we've got Christian Scott double-digit owned and Freddie Peralta double-digit owned. They're each 11% owned. Kyle Harrison, what was he, like 12 or 13%? I'm trying to remember what we talked about before. So it looks like in their place, Scott and Peralta have become more popular, and Luzardo is now 9% owned on FanDuel. So no real like crazy major changes, but that's just where we're at with everything. Does that change anything for you, Matt? I assume no, because these are, fairly minor changes.
Yeah, with you. Nothing really changes for me there.
All right, so let's go back and let's see. Lineup generator, probably up maybe 1 more minute, but let's see, Jordan. Let's see. Moment of truth here. Scroll down. Yeah, he's still in there. So let's talk about our favorite single entry stack. Then we'll get back to this, Matt. Right now, if you're building your lineup for a single entry, which I mean, I've already built out mine, and I assume that you've probably done the same, because now that we're locking in a fairly short order, which team are you looking to play in single entry today, Matt?
Detroit. So it's close for me. I'm playing a couple different teams on this slate. I'm playing 4 lineups or 5 lineups actually, but I'm playing Detroit. They were the highest leverage stack on the board. They're still right up there. I don't think they're going to get any love at their price tags, despite facing one of the worst pitchers on the slate. I thought it might end up being the Dodgers, but it's kind of the same thing we always talk about. The guys you want are crazy expensive, and those are the guys that will be owned. So I'm on the Tigers here. I also like Seattle a lot. I didn't say them because It's a tough ballpark for right-handed power, which is what you want to pick on means with. But I still like them a lot. So it's Detroit 1A, Seattle 1B for me. How about you?
I like the Atlanta Braves. And earlier in the day, we didn't really talk about them on the strategy show, but the reason I didn't talk about them is I was looking at the weather report with 70% chance of thunderstorms. And it's like, what's the point of even putting much merit into talking about the Braves or thinking about them when I was pretty sure the game was going to be rained out? But what ends up happening now is the weather cleared up. It looks pretty good now. And then as I run the Sims and I start to look a little bit closer at the Braves, I like the spot for them against Waldron. Also, you look at the Braves offense and it's still reasonably priced. Acuna is very expensive, but 5,200 for Matt Olson. That's cheaper than he normally is. Michael Harris is $4,500. That's a pretty decent price point. Orlando Arcia is $3,600. I don't mind playing him in some Brave stacks, but you really could play the best hitters on the Braves. I mean, I'll tell you, my single entry team has Matt Olson, it has Ozzy Albies, it has Ronald Acuna, and I was still able to get Raggins into it as well. If you go Raggins or Cortez with one of the cheap pitchers, whether it be Christian Scott or Jesus Luzardo, you could pretty easily stack up the Braves with the best pitchers on the slate that you and I have said that we like. And you're also getting pretty good ownership on them. The Braves are, yeah, the Braves are a low owned offense, Matt. We've got the Braves at 4% ownership and the fourth highest odds being the top scoring stat.
Yeah, they're right up there too. Waldron's not very good, and the Braves are. So I think there's a bunch of different stacks that look almost equally as good as each other on this slate. Do you see it the same?
Yeah, there's a lot of there's not going to be like one team that like yesterday the Mets. I jammed the Mets. One of the oddest ways for a stack to work out because it looked like it was going to crush. Then all of a sudden, Taijuan Walker gets hurt. The Phillies go to their best bullpen arms. It's like, oh shit, now the Mets are going to get shut down. The Mets do nothing for a lot of innings. Then the game goes to extra innings, and the Mets would score, and the Phillies would tie it. So it kept getting extended, and then we got a bunch of like the core Mets hitters were able to pick up an extra like 2, 3, 5 fantasy points in extra innings. So Met stack ended up being good, but like I don't have a team like that today where I'm like, this is the team I feel is like way better than every other stack. So like I didn't have more than 20% exposure to any individual team when I ran my last set of Sims, which is about to be rerun now that everything's updated for Kyle Harrison being out.
Man, I wish the Met stack was good last night, but they pinch hit for the guys who had actually did anything, and Lindor stinks. So I wish it were good last night, but they weren't good for me at least.
Yeah, I think I finished like 20th in the $121 with the Mets. I'm trying to remember who else I had in that
You
lineup.
probably
I
used
remember
Javier.
I had Devers as a one-off. That helped
Did
because he
you use
homered.
Christian Javier?
No,
Oh,
I didn't have Javier. I think all my one-offs might have homered yesterday.
okay.
I had Glass now as a pitcher. I think it was Glass now and Jared Jones I ended up getting to as my pitchers in single entry. But yeah, that aside, I don't really find one stack that really stands out above all of the rest. Let's go back to the lineup generator and see if that is updated now, Jordan. Give it a refresh. Go to DraftKings. Balance lineups. I'm going to send a message to get that updated. Although run some lineups. See, maybe he won't show up in lineups. Oh, it looks like he isn't showing up in lineups now. Okay, I think we're good. Oh, no, never mind. All right. Sending a message right now to the data team.
While you do that, you know what other offense I really like tonight that's not getting ownership?
Which team?
The Twins. I don't buy Tristan McKenzie at all. I think he just looks off. And the Twins have upside in this spot. So they're another team in consideration for me. Any interest there for you?
For the Twins, I wasn't getting to them earlier against McKenzie. So I definitely don't want to play McKenzie today. And we've had a lot of conversations about like, what's this guy's deal, right? Because We've seen Tristan McKenzie. He was a top pitching prospect at one point. He was also a top end pitcher, but it seems he potentially needs Tommy John surgery. He's pitching with a partially torn UCL and he's trying to put it off. So his velocity is way down, way down this year, but they're having him pitch through it. He's been okay as of late, but with the velocity being down, he's kind of struggling to generate strikeouts. And I just have a lot of red flags that make me not want to roster him as a pitcher. So on the other side, like if I had to play one side, I'd be more inclined to stack against him than actually play him. But with that still being in mind, I don't think I'm going to be prioritizing the Twins.
That's fair. I don't think McKenzie is like the worst pitcher on the slate or anything like that. I just think that the Twins are getting ownership as if he's better than he is, and they have upside in this spot. So just another one of those teams that look good that aren't getting much ownership. That's all it is.
Yeah. No, I think that certainly makes sense. Another thing too, though, is because the top pitchers on the slate, like Raggins, like Cortez, and even some of the other ones, like Heaney, Luzardo, you don't have to really pay a premium for pitching today. I find that makes it much easier to get to some of the more expensive bats than we've had on other slates. So that's where I think the salary savings for the Twins, a little bit unnecessary, but assuming you've built or hand-built lineups with the Twins, or at least one lineup with them, how easy is it to pair them with both Raggins and Cortez?
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. And man, it's just crazy to me where ownership is going for offense tonight. Like the Angels are the highest owned team on the slate. I get it. They're cheap and they've been good recently, but no thanks on that. The Rangers, yeah, Tyler Anderson isn't great, but he really limits righty power, and the Rangers have been awful against left-handed pitching. So not interested there. The Yankees look good, no denying it. They're just expensive. And then the Mets against Luzardo, like, no thanks there.
Yeah, there's no real chalk at offense. I mean, Jordan's got it up on screen here. Sort by the ownership, Jordan. Yeah, I mean, like you said, the chalkiest offense is the Angels, but it's still 7.5% projected ownership. And the next most popular, 7% for the Rangers. There's nothing that's problematic as far as the ownership goes at pitching. It is, I mean, at offense, just like with pitching, it's very spread out today. Part of that is just because of how many options there are on the slate and how many decent, spots there are. But it is pretty interesting how spread out the offense ownership is. Like, I don't think the ownership is problematic on any one team. Would you agree with that?
100% agree. And a lot of the stacked ownership is coming from individual hitters who are going to be high owned. So like you use like the back half of lineups and stuff. That's not going to be high owned at all, especially in like the lower, like the smaller field type stuff. So yeah, I'm not worried, or I wouldn't be worried about playing any offense on this slate. I just think the Angels are over owned for who they are and how many other good options are on this slate. That's all it is.
One other team that I'm noticing that I'm getting exposure to, and then also stuff that is about to change here when I'm about to rerun, but still, like the best offenses are still going to be the best offenses. I like the Toronto Blue Jays today going up against Tyler Alexander. I think that's kind of a slept on spot here. We've got, what is the most recent ownership here? Because there's only two teams I have double digit exposure to as a stack, and that is the Atlanta Braves and the Toronto Blue Jays. Blue Jays 6% owned against Tyler Alexander. This Blue Jays offense also, I think, has more talent than people realize at this point, because there's still a lot of good individual hitters. They've just struggled out of the gate so far this year. But this is a pretty good spot to turn it around. Tyler Alexander, who's made half his appearances out of the bullpen, still has a 5.4 ERA, a 4.79 expected ERA, 5.38 FIP. Another thing to really like about stacking against Tyler Alexander, Matt, 30% ground ball rate, but a 14.5% home run to fly ball rate. This guy, for his entire career, has been extremely home run prone, and that's even as a reliever. One of these guys, we talk through these pitchers a lot. He's been in the big league since 2019. He's been terrible since 2019. Like, how are you a reliever that sticks in the big leagues for 7 years, 6 years with an ERA close to 5 as a reliever when you give up home runs? It's pretty bizarre to me. I think that the Blue Jays, and once again, there's no individual team that's like crazy popular or anything like that. I think the Blue Jays probably should be popular on this slate.
Yeah, I have no disagreement with that. The only thing I'd say to that and why they're not is I just don't think they look all that much different from, like, again, the Tigers, the Braves, the Red Sox. All of these teams look really similar to me.
And one other thing to point out here, just as like a minor piece of news, Max Muncy has been put on the injured list. If people are wondering why it is that that he's not in the lineup, so Max Muncy is going to be out. And now we've got Einstein asking, do I like the Guardians as a stack? This is your local team there, Matt. What do you think of the Guardians today going up against, what is it, Simeon Woods Richardson, man of many names and minimal talents?
Yeah, Woods Richardson has been much better than expected, like in the big leagues, considering how he wasn't very good in the minors. I'm still not buying it, but I don't have a ton of interest in the Guardian stack as a whole. That said, mini stacks like the top of their lineup, specifically 2 through 4, Jimenez, J-Ram, and Naylor all look really good to me. I think dollar for dollar, even at 5,900, J-Ram is my favorite third base option on the slate. Kind of a weaker position in my mind. If I'm not using a guy from a stack, I want J-Ram there, but I'm not prioritizing the full stack. No.
Yeah, not a priority for myself either. It's just like a team that exists. I think I'm gonna have exposure to them. Just the ownership is like pretty fair. The two teams I'm prioritizing, I already said it's the Braves and the Toronto Blue Jays. Are there any really low owned offenses that stand out to you for any particular reason?
It's the Twins. So that's another reason I like them. They're really low owned. So you don't have to worry about ownership with any of these teams, but most of the ones we're talking about are coming in between 5 and 10% owned. The Twins are going to be half that, which is worth something. So I do like Minnesota here. They're kind of expensive. I'm not buying what McKenzie is selling. They have upside here. They're obviously guaranteed the full 9 at bats. Cleveland only has one lefty in their pen to worry about. Minnesota for me.
One other thing that I'll add about Simeon Woods Richardson, he's had a really easy strength of schedule. If I remember correctly, I think his first 2 starts were both against the Chicago White Sox, which definitely benefited his numbers a little bit. So to the point you made before, like I don't Simeon Woods Richardson, he's pitched better than expected, but I think some of that has been because of the matchups. And there's a reason also. Do you remember like Simeon Woods Richardson, his first start? What was he like? 40% owned or something like that, which was because he was the flat minimum price 4K and he had a really easy matchup against the Chicago White Sox. So there was, I don't think like expectations the guy would be a good starting pitcher, but people did expect him to pitch well, at least on those individual slates because of the matchups. Let me go back into Discord to see if we had any other questions that came in, and not anything showing up there. Running one final sim here with updated ownership and everything before we get to lock. Anything that we haven't talked about that's important to you on the slate, Matt, whether it's a pitcher we didn't hit on or maybe a stack or anything like that?
Yeah, 2 things that I touched on a little bit, but wanted to get your perspective on: the Tigers and the Angels. What are you doing with those teams?
I don't think I'm going to be playing either of them very much. The problem, the Angels are actually like somewhat popular relative to the other teams on the slate. And then in addition to that, I like Heaney. So I'm going to be overweight to Heaney. I'm going to be underweight to the field on the Angels. And then what was the other team you would ask me about?
Detroit.
Yeah, so Detroit going up against Ryan Nelson. Yeah, Detroit was my last run of sims. I had 7% exposure to the Tigers. It's a good spot for them against Ryan Nelson, and the Tigers are also relatively cheap. Like I think you could build Tiger stacks and get Raggins and Cortez as the pitchers in those lineups. So it's definitely a stack that's going to be in my player pool. It'll be a little bit overweight too.
Cool.
All right. So if there are no final questions for us here in Discord, which it doesn't look like there are, if you guys haven't done it yet, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Time to talk about dongs, Matt. Who's going yard today? What is the dong of the day?
Max Kepler's going yard off Tristan McKenzie.
Ooh. And people in chat, you can throw yours in as well. Boy, this is tough. There's a lot of spots to choose from. No Coors Field game, so we don't have to eliminate anything. You know what? I'm playing the Braves in single entry. They're going to be my highest owned stack. I'm going to go with Matt Olson. And we've seen from the Braves this year, a little bit of a down start to the year for Matt Olson, a little bit of a down start to the year for Ronald Acuna. These guys are going to be fine, though. These are, two of the best hitters we have in baseball. I'll go with Matt Olson for my home run pick of the day here. As far as chat, what do we have from chat? Junior Whoppers got Justin Turner, Casey Leatherwood. Oh, wow. First two bet. Justin Turner was the first two picks here. Alex has got Ohtani. Steve Sant has got Giancarlo Stanton. Have you looked at any of those new swing speed metrics that they have on Baseball Savant?
A little bit, yeah. How about you?
So the reason I brought it up is because somebody picked Giancarlo Stanton, and you look at the swing speed things, like 98% of his swings are max effort swings. The dude only swings for the fence. Also, his average swing speed is like 80 miles per hour. The second highest is 77. The gap between how hard he swings and everybody else, it's like crazy. That was the one. I don't know what to do with the information. I don't think it means anything. I just kind of think it's funny to look at. And the Stanton stuff really stood out. Carlos Santana from Aiden Easton. We've got Malukar's going Torkelson double dom today. Helms has got Gunnar Henderson. Andy Melman has got Riley Green here. Slim Lancaster, Ryan Jeffers. Jordan Klein, Lars Nootbaar. Whoa. Jordan Klein. That is certainly not on brand for you, Lars Nootbaar. Sotex has got Bobby Witt Jr. Flex has got Sean V. He's picking Sean V to hit a home run. Helms also mentioned Torkelson there. He said, oh, no, he just said Torkelson's just worried about putting the ball in play. Aaron Hines has got Jared Kelenic. Michael Roundtree's got Davis Schneider. Francisco Rubio's going with Volpe. So there's some of the picks there. By the way, like 4 people picked Justin Turner. He was a very, very popular pick. And then Ace of Spade wants to know what we're liking for DK tiers. So let me pull up tiers really quick. And I'll look at some tiers lineups before we close it out here. Tiers, we could get to a lot of Yankees in tiers. So tier 1, I'm going to go with Juan Soto. Tier 2, Aaron Judge. So we could get more of a Yankee stack there. Tier 3, that is going to be Adolis Garcia for me. Tier 4, Corey Seager, so we can fit more Rangers in there. Tier 5, I'll go with my guy Matt Olson. Matt Olson, Tier 5, it goes to show how much he's slipped that he's down in Tier 5. And to get more Yankees correlation, I'll go with Anthony Volpe in Tier 6. One final question that came into Discord, and it is... Einstein asked, do we have interest in Paxton? Paxton, somebody you're playing at pitcher, considering it all, Matt?
No, not even a little bit. Another guy I'm not buying what he's selling. I know he's been good the past 2 starts, but just don't really see the need for it on this slate. How about yourself?
Yeah, no Paxton interest for me. So that is going to do it for us. Guys, thank you very much for watching. If you've not done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. NBA Live Before Lock is going to be an hour, and then after that, myself and Josh, Friday night, come hang out with us while we watch the Knicks-Pacers game. Can the Pacers force a Game 7 for one final 2-game slate to finish out the NBA DFS season? Can we go one more 2-gamer? Find out tonight over on Playback. Josh and I watch Pacers and Knicks play. So, guys, hope to see you there. Other than that, have a good night. Good luck. See you later. Peace out.